Just welcome students. Today's video is about question 4 part A, that is from November 2023 exam series. It's paper 2-2, that is paper 2 of variant 2, 9708 A-level economics. It's a part A question, 8 marks question. Let me read out the question for you. Explain the difference between the terms of trade and the balance of trade in goods and consider whether an economy should be more concerned about its terms of trade than its balance of trade in goods. So as you are aware that there are 3 marks for assessment objective 1, that is knowledge understanding, 3 marks for assessment objective 2, analysis, 3 marks, and 2 marks for assessment objective 3, that is evaluation. So that is how these 8 marks are distributed. The examiner has made things easier for us by mentioning balance of trade in goods. Even if the word goods was not mentioned, we should have understood that balance of trade relates to the export and import of goods only. So let's begin by writing what is required for knowledge understanding for 3 marks. So first we give the definition of balance of trade. So balance of trade, the key word would be goods. So balance of trade is the difference between the value of exports and the key word I am writing in the difference of goods. Balance of trade is the difference between the value of export of goods and the expenditures of imports of goods. Expenditures on imports of goods. So balance of trade records the exports and imports of goods only. And what do we mean by the word value? Please do not confuse the word value with price. Price is unit price or average price. Value is obtained by multiplying unit price with the quantity. So for example, if I am selling 100 units at an average price of 10, the unit price is 10, the volume or the quantity is 100, and the value would be 10 multiplied by 100, that is 1000. Instead of writing word value of export, you may also write the word export revenue. So export revenue is value export minus import expenditure. That is the definition of knowledge understanding. That is the definition for balance of trade, and this gives us a mark for knowledge understanding. A green tick means 1 mark. The second mark is for the definition of terms of trade. So terms of trade, and we call it TOT as well. TOT is a numerical measure. It is a formula. It is a ratio. Numerical measure that compares average price of exports and average price of imports. So terms of trade is a numerical measure that compares average price of exports and average price of import, and we get the second knowledge understanding mark. And for the third, we need to give the formula whenever there is a mathematical measure like price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, cross elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, or terms of trade. We need to give an accurate formula for that. So terms of trade, the formula is average export price divided by average import price, and do not forget to multiply it with 100 to get the third knowledge understanding mark. Now please note, you may write export price index divided by import price index into 100. That would be correct as well. Remember, exports are of different types. A country may export rice, or it may also export aeroplanes. Now the price of aeroplane and the price of a unit of rice is quite different. We cannot take the prices of both goods unless we convert them and put them in a basket and then take the price of that basket. And that basket price is known as the index price. So either we write the word export price index divided by import price index into 100, or we write average export price divided by average import price into 100. Then we can get the formula marks. We cannot get the formula mark if we only show the ratio of export price and import price, or do not confuse this concept with export value or the quantity of export. It only compares terms of trade, only compare the prices of export and import. Now this is enough for 3 knowledge understanding marks. We now move and now we do the analysis. Analysis again worth 3 marks. So we look at the question again. Explain the difference between terms of trade and the balance of trade in goods. We have answered that part. That's the knowledge understanding part. Consider whether an economy should be more concerned about its terms of trade than its balance of trade. So we now analyze what are the problems, what could be the potential problems for an economy, for a country, if its terms of trade changes or when its balance of trade in goods changes. So what would be the problem? The analysis of those problems would give us 3 marks. And then we'll do the comparison between the problems of terms of trade and the problems of balance of trade, and we'll see which has more problems. That would be evaluation. So first we do the analysis, and analysis involves the comparison of problems. So what happens if balance of trade changes? Balance of trade may become deficit if imports, now imports over here means import expenditures. You may write the complete word, import expenditures. However, word alone import could be sufficient to describe that we are talking about import expenditures. We are not talking here about price of import. We are talking about the total value of import. So balance of trade may become deficit if imports rise faster than export revenues, or but just export is enough. Now what will happen? Net exports would become negative if there is a deficit. Net exports are exports minus imports, and export revenue minus import expenditures. The net exports become negative, aggregate demand falls. And when aggregate demand falls, what happens? It leads to lower GDP and lower employment. So balance of trade could lead to less AD, less GDP, less employment, and of course it may force government to borrow more. We can go on and go on to discuss other consequences of a deficit of balance of trade, but this should be enough for 2 marks. Why we are saying 2 marks? Because there are 3 marks in total for analysis. So at least 1 mark must be scored by mentioning terms of trade. If we only talk about balance of trade, we can get a maximum of only 2 analysis marks. So that's enough for 2 analysis marks. Now we move on and discuss the terms of trade and the problems its changes may bring in. Changes in terms of trade could be due to changes in relative prices of exports and imports. A TOT, that is terms of trade, rises when export prices rise faster than import prices. Now, there is one change we are mentioning. Now, the examiner does not specify increase or decrease. It uses the word changes, so we can take either of the 2 changes. increase or decrease. So over here we have taken a TOT is rising. Now what will happen? Exports will become less price competitive and imports would seem more attractive to customers because they look cheaper. When terms of trade rises, exports seem more expensive and import look cheaper. That may help control cost, push inflation as imported inputs would be cheaper. However, exporters may lose due to a fall in demand for exports. So what we are mentioning here, that in case terms of trade rises, and terms of trade rises means exports look expensive and imports seem cheaper. When exports look expensive, the demand for exports may fall, and import may look cheaper. Their demand may go up, but that may help local businesses relying on imported raw materials that their production costs will be controlled. So there will be a benefit of lower cost push inflation. However, there will be a negative impact on exporters. They will not be able to sell more. So this is enough for 3 marks, 3 analysis marks. We now move on to the last section of this question, and that is evaluation. The 2 marks for evaluation. Which one is more damaging? So a balance of trade, we should write changes in balance of trade. Changes in balance of trade are more important for economies which rely heavily on net exports. For these countries, net exports are a greater percentage of GDP. So if for a country imports and exports are a high percentage of their national income, for them any change in balance of trade could be devastating. A country like Pakistan, whose exports are very low, a fall in export may have negative impact, but the impact would be less severe compared to China. If China's exports fall, the impact on Chinese economy would be much bigger, as China heavily relies on export and most of their income comes through exports. Terms of trade is less worrying for countries which export necessities. A rise in TOT. We may write a rise in TOT is less worrying for countries which export necessities. For example, Saudi exporting oil. Even if oil becomes expensive, the demand of oil will still be there, or there won't be any significant decrease in the demand for oil. So more revenue can be earned. So it will be less worrying for them. So we can get 1 mark for either of the 2 paragraphs we have written here, and the last mark will be for the conclusion. And for the conclusion, we can say that the impact that the impact of changes in balance of trade and terms of trade depends on the availability of excess capacity and price last demand for net exports. So if balance of trade rises, if export rise faster than import, that may not be a cause of worry if economy has excess capacity. But if export rise faster than import and there is extra additional aggregate demand for the economy and there is no excess capacity, that may trigger demand pull inflation. In that case, the country may be worried. So it depends on the excess capacity if the country should be concerned or not when balance of trade rises. Similarly, if TOT rises, should a country be concerned or not? It depends upon the price elasticity of demand for net exports. If PED is low, an increase in TOT may not be extremely worrying for the economy. But if in case PED is high and TOT rises, it may make locally made goods less price competitive, and since demand is price elastic, that may have a significant effect on the export of that economy. In that case, a rise in TOT will be more worrying. That concludes my discussion on this question. Thank you very much for liking our videos.